Thank you, Sammy. Matter of fact, speaking about Sammy, I was looking through the office the other day, and in 1992, on October 11th, Sammy was baptized right there. And you're, I think, 3 months old, 4 months old, something like that, because the Haddads had moved to town in July of that year, 1992. So that's kind of fun. You've done pretty good for yourself, Sammy. I'm proud of you.
Thanks.
Since your baptism.
Now, there's a reason that I lift Sammy up, and it's this. And I lift up the children in this church. And you'll see why in just a moment. What you see Sammy Kareem achieving is the result of 16 years of quality religious education by the teachers in this church and by his parents. And that's what you get. And so Sammy has this foundation, which a lot of young people don't have. And so Sammy's going to be just fine. He'll be just fine. And you'll understand what I'm talking about. I do want to say this so I don't forget it. I look out and I see Joe and Renee, and they went, I've mentioned this from the pulpit before, but it's really worth mentioning again. They went to one of the better coeducational small liberal arts colleges in the world, in the United States certainly, Calvin College. And as a result of that, one of the things that happened is that the people that go there get a fantastic religious education. We've had several people over the years from Calvin, and these young people, at that time young people, 20, 21 years old, they know much more about religion and the Bible and theology than most people in the pews. And there's a reason why I'm lifting them up, as you'll see as well. And it's an instructive lesson. And that, I had a note here, and it's really I want to begin this, that I forever have considered myself as one of the most fortunate people in the world, and really the word would be blessed, for reasons that are way beyond my will or my control. I have always been in the pursuit then of maturing in my relationship with Jesus Christ. And I want to emphasize that began when I was a little boy, and it continued on into, well, where I am today. Now, you'll see why I'm mentioning that. I also wanted to note here that this week past, my brother and sister-in-law were in town. You recall that Rose Margaret, her daughter Linda, lost her husband unexpectedly last Friday night, and so my sister-in-law came down to do the funeral. Now, both are ordained Presbyterian ministers, and we talked about, among other things, how most Christians, and please understand, I know there are exceptions to this, but most Christians, after junior high usually, or high school quite often, most of these Christians leave behind their religious education and pursue other concerns. And that's fine to a certain extent. In this testing and growing period that happens after high school, to be sure, but certainly after adolescence is over, in this testing and growing period, younger souls then learn to pursue, to study for various occupations, and I say good for them. You know, they're trying to figure out where they're going to fit in the world and what they're going to grow up to become, just as we all have wrestled with those questions at some time in our life. Some would become firefighters, homemakers, merchants, mathematicians. In short, I'm glad they all have done that. They then find themselves in what fits for themselves. They find, I would hope, what they do best in their lives. often, though not always, they put on the back burner or even neglect, if not forget, their spiritual needs. They're preoccupied with getting their education. They're preoccupied with learning a vocation. They're preoccupied with starting a new family. They're preoccupied with mowing the yard. They're preoccupied with how can I afford this apartment? They're preoccupied with buying their first car. They're preoccupied with all sorts of things that are important, that have to do with life. But as a result, in their pursuit of trying to take care of the things that they find have the most priority, what they end up doing, and we know this is true, they end up forgetting or neglecting their spiritual needs. Time rolls on, and eventually a few of them drift back to church, and if not a few, then more than a few, but not a great number. They drift back to church sooner or later. Maybe when they're in their late 20s, we'll say. And the problem is this. They return emotionally and educationally as teenagers. Exactly the same way were I to try and open up a book on algebra. I don't know if I can spell algebra. But I did take it and did poorly, I'm sure, in what, the 7th grade? Doctor, isn't that when we take algebra, the 7th grade, something like that? Now, so consequently, were I to take algebra again, or worse yet, if I were to go to IU and find myself in a lecture hall that was offering, and I don't even know how to spell calculus or advanced geometry, I would be, of course, unprepared. I wouldn't understand it emotionally. I wouldn't understand it academically. I wouldn't understand it educationally. I would be completely, totally lost. In a similar way, many Christians are lost in their mature or in a mature understanding of Jesus when they come back to church. And they're bewildered because they haven't kept up educationally and spiritually where they would have been had they gone to church the whole way. See what I'm saying? So, for example, I look at Sammy and his family and other young adults in this church. They're right. It's really pretty exciting to see 16, 17, 18-year-old young adults where they are in their spiritual maturity. And then I look at Renee and Joe, 30-ish, and they are right where they should be at age 30 in their spiritual understanding of Jesus and in their academic understanding of Jesus. And that's great. And I look at Ida. You're where you are, where you're supposed to be. But had you not gone to church, had you not had a good education by your parents, had you not gone to Calvin College, or in my case, Earlham College, had you not had people then pursuing with you your relationship with Jesus Christ, you would only be where you were when you left it off. You see what I'm saying? Now, the reason for this, I'm just going to show you what the reason is, kind of fun reason. And so when people have trouble in churches, let's say, so let's say a person goes back to church and gets involved with the church, and something happens that he or she doesn't understand or doesn't like. If they haven't been in church for years, or since they were kids, how are they going to respond to that particular problem? Well, they're not going to respond as an adult Christian. They're going to respond as a young person. And that means they're going to be emotionally confused. That means they're going to be academically unprepared. That means they're going to be intellectually and spiritually not mature. Some people, however, when they do go back to church, they would find this lucky. I would not find it lucky. But if they go to some churches that encourages them to stay children and feeds on making adults stay children, subservient to pastoral authority, happy to be about emotions instead of the substance of the gospel, what Paul would call the meat of the gospel, then maybe that's where they need to be at that time, although I don't think so. Telling them how to behave and then scaring them If they wobble just one little bit, well, we of course don't do this. We choose to have, and this is a word I've used repeatedly, we choose to have an adult relationship with Jesus. And Sammy, I'm looking at you. When you were younger, you looked at Christ through young eyes, and that's the way you were supposed to. I expect you and demand of you, frankly, to begin looking at Jesus with adult eyes. That's your job. You can do it. Or you can stay a little boy. You know? And why would you want to be a little boy in the faith having your Christianity run by emotion instead of good doctrine? Although I understand that a lot of people go to church to feel good, that's immature Christianity, of course. So I say this, that what we do in this fellowship is we're about the work of trying to come into an adult relationship with Jesus Christ, to grow into an adult relationship with Jesus Christ. This is not to say that Jesus is our buddy, far from that, but that he is our friend, and that's scriptural, and he's our adult friend. Somewhere along the line, people either never understood that or have chosen not to believe that, even though it's biblical. And you can look that up in John, and Jesus says, "No longer do I call you servants, but I call you friends." Adult friends. And that's the relationship we're supposed to have with Jesus Christ when we become adults. Now, the Apostle Paul had an adult relationship with Jesus. He was maybe 35 when he came to Jesus, and after 30 more years of maturing, walking with Jesus, I would say, he figured out a few things about what it means to have a relationship with Jesus Christ that is a grown-up relationship with Jesus Christ. Among them is he wants people to understand that sorrow, wealth, poverty, health, disease, now follow me on this, have absolutely, I don't use that word very often, but I'll do it this time, absolutely nothing to do with one's relationship with Jesus. Now, not to be too corny, I'll prove this to you. Those of you who disagree with me, I'm going to prove it to you, which is fine if you want to disagree with me. If you really love Jesus, you plant a financial seed for Jesus Christ in this church and give a love gift, a seed offering of $35,000 to ensure that you're going to heaven. Because that's the way I interpret Scripture to read. Chuck, you're shaking your head. That's childish, isn't it? Of course it is. But there are all sorts of children who want to go to heaven, and they give money as seed offering. That's childish, for goodness sakes. It's screwball. And it's thievery. I'll say it again. One of the things, among things that Paul figured out was this. Sorrow, wealth, poverty, health, disease have absolutely nothing to do with Jesus Christ. In other words, he doesn't bring disease. He doesn't bring you wealth. He doesn't bring you an education. I tell the students, Jesus, Aida, will not take your test for you. You get to flunk it on your own, and you get to ace it on your own. He may be sitting with you, but he's not going to give you the answer.